3 weeks ago, I almost died on Facebook Live. It started like any other Thursday night stream. I'd been doing these late night sessions for months. Just me, my guitar, and whoever wanted to listen. Usually pulled in about 50 viewers, mostly insomniacs and night shift workers who appreciated the background music. Nothing special, just a guy in his apartment trying to make a connection in this disconnected world. "Evening, everyone," I said, adjusting my webcam and strumming a few chords. The familiar names started popping up in the comments. Sarah Night Owl, Insomnia Dave, Music Lover 99. My regulars, my digital family. I was halfway through an acoustic version of Mad World when the first comment appeared that made my fingers stumble on the strings. "Watching you 47. Nice apartment, Sean. Love what you've done with the place." The username was new, but that wasn't unusual. What bothered me was how they knew my name. I mean, sure, I'd mentioned it before, but something about the comment felt intimate and personal. Like they were standing right behind me, whispering in my ear. I kept playing, trying to shake off the unease. The viewer count was climbing. 63, 68, 72. Higher than usual for a Thursday. "Watching you 47. That window behind you. Do you always leave the blinds open?" My blood went cold. I lived on the 4th floor. No one could see through that window unless they were in the building across the street, and that building had been abandoned for years. I'd chosen this apartment specifically because of the privacy. "Thanks for tuning in, everyone," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "But I think that's enough for tonight." As I reached for my laptop to end the stream, another comment flashed across the screen. "Watching you 47. Don't stop now, Sean. We're just getting started." The viewer count hit 112, then 147. These weren't my people. These were strangers, drawn by something I couldn't see. That's when I heard the first tap against my window. Tap, tap, tap. I froze, my hand hovering over the laptop keyboard. 4th floor? No fire escape. No way for anyone to reach that window. "Watching 47. You hear that, don't you? The sound of opportunity knocking." The comment section exploded. My regular viewers were confused, asking what was happening, but they were drowning in a flood of new messages from accounts I'd never seen. All variations of the same theme. Watching you 47. Had invited them. Told them there was going to be a show. Tap, tap, tap. This time, I turned around. The window was still there, still showing nothing but the night sky and the dark building across the street. But something was different. In the black windows of the abandoned building, I could see tiny pinpricks of light. Not electric lights. These were smaller, more focused, like phone screens. Like dozens of people standing in those empty rooms, watching me through my own window. My hands shook as I turned back to the camera. The viewer count was approaching 300. Watching 47. They wanted to see you perform, Sean. Really perform. Don't disappoint them. That's when I saw the red dot dancing across my chest. Laser sight. I dove away from the window just as the first bullet shattered the glass. The sound was deafening in my small apartment, and I could hear myself screaming. though it felt like the voice belonged to someone else. My laptop had fallen to the floor, but it was still streaming, still broadcasting my terror to hundreds of strangers who had somehow known this was going to happen. Another shot, then another. I crawled behind my couch, pulling my phone from my pocket with trembling fingers, trying to call 911 while bullets turned my living room into a war zone. The comments kept flowing on my fallen laptop screen, and I could see them from my hiding spot. Anonymous 457. This is better than TV. Stream watcher. Is this real? Nightcrawler. 88. $5 says he doesn't make it. They thought it was fake. Performance art. A elaborate hoax for views and follows. The shooting stopped. In the sudden silence, I could hear sirens approaching. Someone else must have called the police. Thank God. But then I heard footsteps in my hallway. Heavy boots on carpet, and a voice I recognized from a dozen phone calls, 100 text messages, 1,000 promises that things could be different if I just gave us another chance. Did you really think you could hide from me, Sean? Parker stepped through my shattered doorway, smoking rifle in her hands, her face illuminated by the glow of my laptop screen. My ex-girlfriend, the woman I'd broken up with 6 months ago when her jealousy and paranoia became too much to bear. All those people watching you, she said, gesturing toward the screen where the viewer count had hit 400 and climbing. They love a good show, don't they? They love watching someone get what's coming to them. The red dot appeared on my forehead, and I realized with crystalline clarity that she'd been planning this for months. The abandoned building, the mysterious viewers, the perfectly timed stream that would give her the audience she craved for her final performance. Parker, please, say goodbye to your fans, Sean. The last thing I remember before the police burst in was the sound of my laptop notification. Another comment from Watching You 47. Thanks for the show. Same time next week. I survived. The bullet grazed my skull, knocked me unconscious, but I lived. Parker didn't. The police shot her when she refused to drop the rifle. But here's the thing that keeps me awake at night. The thing no one believes. When I got out of the hospital and checked my Facebook account, the stream was still active, still broadcasting. The viewer count had reached over 10,000, and every single one of them was Watching You 47. Different numbers, same name, as if Parker had somehow multiplied herself across hundreds of fake accounts, creating an audience for a show that was supposed to end with my death. The stream finally went dark 3 days ago, but I can still hear the tapping at my window. The candles flickered as Madame Latifa closed her eyes, her weathered hands hovering over the crystal ball that sat between us. I watched her face contort with concentration, waiting for any sign that she'd made contact with Tracy. 3 years. It had been 3 years since my best friend died in that car accident, and I still couldn't accept that she was really gone. "I'm sorry, dear," Madame Latifa finally said, opening her eyes with what looked like genuine regret. "The veil is too thick tonight. Your friend, she's not coming through." My heart sank. I'd driven 2 hours to this cramped parlor in the mountains, Spent my last $200, all for nothing. The old woman reached across the table and patted my hand with surprising gentleness. Sometimes the recently departed need more time, she offered. Perhaps try again in a few months. But I didn't have a few months. The grief was eating me alive, had been for 3 years now. Justin kept telling me I needed to move on, that Tracy wouldn't want me living like this. Easy for him to say. He was off in Vegas right now with his buddies, living it up, while I sat here desperately trying to reach beyond the grave. The drive home felt endless. Every mile stretched like elastic, the mountain roads winding through darkness that seemed to press against my windshield. By the time I pulled into our driveway, it was past midnight. Our 5-bedroom house loomed against the starless sky, every window dark except for the porch light I'd left on. I fumbled with my keys at the front door, hands still shaking from disappointment. The house felt different when I stepped inside. Colder, somehow more hollow than usual. Justin's absence always made the place feel too big, but tonight it felt vast, like a cathedral built for ghosts. I kicked off my heels in the entryway and padded to the kitchen in my stockings. The hardwood floors creaked under my feet, familiar sounds that usually comforted me. But as I reached for a glass from the cabinet, I heard something else. A soft thud from upstairs. I froze, glass halfway to the sink. Justin wasn't supposed to be back until Sunday. It was only Thursday night. Maybe something had fallen. We'd had problems with mice before, though Justin swore he'd sealed all the entry points. The water ran cold over my hands as I filled the glass, but I barely noticed. Another sound drifted down from the second floor, like footsteps, but muffled, as if someone was walking on carpet and socks. My mouth went dry. "Hello?" I called out, my voice cracking slightly. "Justin, did you come home early?" Silence. I set the glass down with trembling fingers and moved toward the staircase. The steps groaned under my weight as I climbed, each sound unnaturally loud in the quiet house. At the top of the stairs, I peered down the long hallway. All the doors were closed, just as I had left them. "Justin?" I tried again. Softer this time. Nothing. I checked our bedroom first, flipping on the light switch. Empty. The bed was still perfectly made, Justin's cologne still lingering faintly in the air. I moved to the guest rooms one by one, turning on lights, checking closets. Nothing seemed disturbed. Maybe I was just on edge from the failed seance. Disappointment and exhaustion could play tricks on the mind. I retreated to our bedroom, changed into my nightgown, and tried to convince myself that everything was fine. But sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard sounds, soft footsteps in the hallway, doors opening and closing, the faint whisper of fabric against fabric. Twice I got up to investigate, and twice I found nothing out of place. By morning, I was exhausted and jittery. I made coffee with shaking hands and tried to focus on normal things, checking my email, scrolling through social media, anything to ground myself in reality. Justin had posted photos from Vegas, him and his friends grinning beside slot machines, drinks in hand. He looked so happy, so carefree. I envied him. The day passed uneventfully, but as evening approached, the strange occurrences began again. This time, it wasn't just sounds. I was making dinner when I noticed the living room lamp was on, a lamp I distinctly remembered turning off that morning. When I went to switch it off, I found a book lying open on the coffee table. Jane Eyre, one of Tracy's favorites, hadn't touched that book in years. My hands trembled as I picked it up. The pages were open to a passage about loss, about the persistence of love beyond death. Had I left it like this? Was my grief making me forget things? That night was worse. The sounds were louder, more distinct. Footsteps pacing the hallway, doors opening and closing. And sometime around 2 a.m., I heard something that made my blood freeze. Laughter. Soft, feminine laughter drifting down from one of the empty bedrooms. It sounded like Tracy. I lay in bed, covers pulled up to my chin, trying to rationalize what I was hearing. Grief could cause auditory hallucinations, couldn't it? The mind could conjure the voices of the dead when the heart missed them desperately enough. But when I heard my name being called, Cheryl, in a voice I knew better than my own, I couldn't stay in bed any longer. I crept upstairs to the 3rd floor. Following the voice, it led me to the room at the end of the hall, the one we used for storage. The door was ajar, though I knew I'd closed it earlier. Pale light spilled through the crack. My hand shook as I pushed the door open. The room was empty, but in the center of the floor sat an old photo album, mine and Tracy's from college. It was open to a picture of us at her graduation, arms around each other, laughing at some joke I could no longer remember. But something was wrong with the photo. My image was there, smiling and young, but Tracy's face was scratched out, gouged away by something sharp. I picked up the album with trembling hands. Page after page, the same thing. Every photo of Tracy had been systematically destroyed, her face scraped away until only rough patches of white remained. I hadn't done this. I would never do this. Tracy? I whispered to the empty room. Is that you? Are you trying to tell me something? The temperature dropped so suddenly I could see my breath. The album slipped from my hands, pages fluttering as it hit the floor. And then I heard it. A voice, clear as day, coming from directly behind me. You killed me, Cheryl. I spun around. The room was empty, but the voice continued. No longer Tracy's warm tones, but something cold and accusatory. You were supposed to drive that night. You were supposed to be in the car. My legs gave out. I collapsed to my knees, memories flooding back. The night of the accident. We'd been at a party. I was supposed to drive Tracy home, but I'd been drinking. She'd insisted on calling a cab instead, but the roads were icy, the driver inexperienced. They'd slid into oncoming traffic on a curve I'd driven 1,000 times. I'm sorry, I sobbed to the empty room. I'm so sorry, Tracy. You should have died instead. The voice was different now. Not Tracy's, not anyone I recognized. Something else had found me. Something that had been waiting in the spaces between worlds. The medium's failure hadn't been a failure at all. It had been protection. I'd opened a door with my grief, my guilt, my desperate need for forgiveness. But what had come through wasn't my best friend. It was something that fed on remorse, that grew stronger with each tear I shed, each sleepless night I spent drowning in what-ifs. Something that had been wearing Tracy's voice like a mask, drawing me deeper into its web of accusations and false hauntings. The lights went out. In the darkness, I heard footsteps, not soft and feminine like before, but heavy, deliberate, coming closer. and I finally understood why Madame Latifa couldn't reach Tracy. She was at peace. I was the one who was haunted. I should have known something was wrong the moment I lit up that joint. My dealer Amir had this weird look in his eyes when he handed it to me. Part excitement, part warning. "This one's different, Tim," he'd said. "Special batch." I thought he meant stronger. I was dead wrong. The first hit tasted metallic, like sucking on pennies. The second made my teeth ache. By the third, reality started to shimmer around the edges like heat waves rising off summer asphalt. I was sitting in my basement apartment, the familiar surroundings of my couch and coffee table beginning to feel foreign under the dim lamplight. At first, it was just the usual stuff. Colors seemed more vivid. Sounds carried a strange echo. But then I noticed the shadows in the corners of my room weren't behaving right. They moved independently, sliding across the walls when they should have been static. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, told myself it was just the weed playing tricks. That's when I heard the scratching. It started soft, like mice in the walls, coming from somewhere behind my head. I turned around, but the sound moved with me, always just out of sight. The scratching grew more insistent, more deliberate, not random scurrying. Something was drawing patterns in the dark spaces between my walls. I stood up too fast and the room tilted. My reflection in the black television screen looked wrong somehow. The face staring back at me had my features, but the expression wasn't mine. It was smiling when I wasn't. I touched my mouth. No smile. The reflection's grin widened. "Okay, that's enough," I said out loud, my voice sounding hollow in the small space. But talking made it worse. The sound of my own voice seemed to hang in the air longer than it should, overlapping with itself until it became a chorus of whispers I couldn't quite understand. I stumbled to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and gripped the sink until my knuckles went white. In the mirror above the basin, I looked pale and drawn, but at least the reflection was doing what it should. I took deep breaths, counted to 10, tried to center myself. Just a bad trip. It would pass. When I returned to the living room, someone was sitting on my couch. My heart stopped. A figure in dark clothes, face obscured by shadow, sitting exactly where I'd been moments before. The joint was still smoldering in the ashtray beside them. They weren't moving, just sitting there like they belonged. How did you, I started, but the words died in my throat. The figure slowly turned their head toward me, and I saw my own face looking back. Not similar, identical, down to the small scar above my left eyebrow from when I was 7. But this other me had eyes that reflected no light, like looking into deep water at night. "You shouldn't have smoked that," the other me said. And its voice was my voice, but wrong, like a recording played backward and forward simultaneously. I ran, bolted for the door, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the locks. The deadbolt wouldn't turn. My fingers kept slipping on the metal. Behind me, I heard the couch springs creaking as the thing wearing my face stood up. "Running won't help," it said, closer now. "We're connected now, Tim. We've always been connected." The lock finally gave way and I crashed through the door into the hallway. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered and buzzed, casting everything in sickly yellow-green. I pounded on my neighbor's door, but no sound came from within. The entire building felt empty, abandoned. That's when I noticed the other doors. Every apartment door in the hallway was slightly ajar, and from each crack seeped absolute darkness. Not just the absence of light, but something that seemed to absorb it. And from those dark gaps came the scratching sound, now multiplied 100-fold. I pressed my back against the wall, hyperventilating. This wasn't real. Couldn't be real. I was having some kind of psychotic break, that's all. Bad weed, maybe laced with something. I just needed to ride it out. But then I saw them emerging from the dark doorways. More versions of myself. Some crawling on hands and knees, others walking upright but jerky, unnatural. All with those same lightless eyes. They filled the hallway. Dozens of them, all wearing different expressions of hunger, rage, desperation. All of them me. "You created us," one of them whispered, the one closest to me. "Every time you got high, every time you escaped reality, you left a little piece behind. We're all the parts of you that you've been running from." I slid down the wall, my legs giving out. The army of selves surrounded me, reaching out with hands that felt like ice. Their touch burned, but not with heat, with the cold truth of recognition. "We've been waiting so long," another one said, kneeling beside me. This one had track marks on its arms, sores around its mouth. "Living in the spaces between your consciousness, growing stronger each time you chose oblivion over existence." The original one from my couch pushed through the crowd, holding the still smoking joint. "This was just the key," it explained, crouching down to meet my eyes. "Amir didn't give you anything special. We just finally had enough pieces to make contact." I tried to scream, but found I had no voice left. The scratching sound was inside my head now, and I realized it had been there all along. The sound of all these abandoned pieces of myself, clawing at the walls of my mind, trying to get back in. "Don't worry," the original said, pressing the joint between my lips. "We're going home now." I took one final hit, and as the smoke filled my lungs, I felt myself dissolving. Not dying, multiplying, fragmenting into all the versions of myself I'd left scattered in the wake of every high, every moment I'd chosen not to be present in my own life. The last thing I remember thinking, before I became we, was how quiet the scratching had finally become. We were all together now, all the broken pieces of Tim, and there was no more need to claw our way back to the surface. We put out the joint and walked back into the apartment, ready to wait for the next time someone needed to escape from themselves. Amir had been right. This batch was special. It didn't just get you high. It brought you home.